Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Daisy. As you guys saw by the title, we are going to be reading my subscribers' spooky stories. Grab your snacks, grab your cobija, and let's get straight into it. A couple of years ago, my great aunt, whom we'll call Luz, passed away in Tijuana, Baja California. Close family members say she passed away on the night of her exorcism. Before she passed, she had been acting strangely, strange enough that the close family thought a priest should see her. When the priest met with her, he said she needed an exorcism as soon as possible. The exorcism was scheduled to happen 3 days later, as it was a Friday. The next day, her estranged sister, we'll call her Sofia, went to visit her. As Sofia reached the door of Luz's house, she had an eerie feeling. While speaking to Luz, Sofia felt like she was talking to a completely different person. Even her voice was different. When she went to the restroom, Sofia saw what appeared to be objects associated with witchcraft or ritual practices. Nonetheless, she stayed for a while, planning to help her sister and young nieces with anything that arose given Luz's condition. As Sofia helped clean around the house, Luz's daughters warned her to not go into a certain room. She believed the reason was that there was more witchcraft going on in there. Oddly enough, she began to feel a dark presence pushing her back when walking by that room door. Upon returning to the room with Luz, Sofia witnessed Luz speaking in tongues and repeatedly poking her finger deep into her nose. The bleeding didn't stop her, which we later found out by the priest that she was repeating a demon's name. After uttering phrases that were not understandable, she finished her sentences with the word maestro. During her funeral, strange things occurred. Many people forgot their prayers midway, and in the chapel, an unexplainable cold and darkness filled the air. There were many people who attended that were unaware of the series of events before her death. Curiously, most people congregated outside the chapel. Few stayed inside with her body for long. As my grandpa was driving home from the viewing, he was praying for Luz's soul, and suddenly all the lights on his car's dashboard flickered, and items in the back of his car flew to the other side. That night, at my grandma's house, my uncle woke up randomly at the same time as me, around 3 in the morning, and as he went to get it, the noise from the water gallon woke my grandma up. She was in her room with the door open and could see us from her bed. That's when we all witnessed the same thing. We saw a tall, dark figure floating outside the window. Keep in mind, we were on the 2nd story. My grandma and uncle didn't want me to be scared, so they assured me it was nothing and told me to go back to bed. We told other family members about what we saw, and we knew it couldn't have been one of our shadows due to the lack of light to cast a shadow. Upon returning home, we shared all the creepy events with my aunt, who couldn't attend the services. As we were speaking, the lights went out, a phenomenon that had never occurred before. To this day, whenever we talk about Luz, weird things happen. Before we dive into the story, I want to clarify that I have 4 sisters and I'm the youngest among them. We have an age gap of 8+ years and are distinctly different from one another. My second older sister, Victoria, has a unique connection to the spiritual realm. She can see and communicate with ghosts. I have plenty of stories growing up with her. While I'm not entirely certain when she became aware of these abilities, as far back as I can remember, she's always had spooky things happen to her. My mother was quite supportive of this. Being Mexican, we grew up learning about numerous superstitions and legends. Given my own encounters with the supernatural at a young age, I believed it all. Now, let's move on to the story. When we were young, my sisters and I moved frequently due to financial reasons, or my mom would get fed up living in certain places. One year, when I was probably in kindergarten or pre-kinder, yes, that young, I have vivid memories from that time. We moved into a duplex. This was probably the largest home we'd ever had. It had 4 bedrooms. The 2 oldest sisters each got their own rooms. The twins shared a bedroom, and my mother and I shared her room since I couldn't sleep alone. After moving into the duplex, my grandmother, who lived about 10 minutes away, decided to stay with us temporarily to help with unpacking and taking care of us while my mom was at work, who had 3 jobs at the time and wasn't home much. Now, our backyard in the duplex wasn't really a backyard. It was surrounded by woods or a forested area. This made it look quite eerie at night. One night, my mom was still at work. We had dinner, showered, and we were getting ready for bed. My mom had come home late from work, so everyone was already asleep. So at the time, my sister Victoria was in her room alone with the radio on, asleep. Just as my mom was about to drift off to sleep in her own bed, she heard my sister screaming for her. My mom hurried to her room. She burst through the door and turned on the lights, asking, "Victoria, what's happening? Why are you screaming?" My sister appeared annoyed and replied, "Mom, tell Selena to go to sleep already. She keeps waking me up and messing with the radio." I'm Selena, the youngest sister. At the time, I was already fast asleep, dreaming of Candy and Brad's dolls beside my grandma. My mom was confused and said, "Victoria, what are you talking about? Selena's already asleep with grandma in my room." My sister didn't believe her and said, "Mom, Selena is right there behind you next to the radio. How do you not see her?" My mom looked around and saw no one. "Victoria, I think you were just dreaming. It's late and I'm tired. Go back to sleep now." As my mom left her room, my sister said, "Selena, just go to sleep with my mom already." My mom ignored her and returned to her room where my grandma and I were sleeping. She shook me to check if I was awake or faking, but I was sound asleep. My mom found it strange but was too tired to dwell on it, so she tried to go back to sleep. Now, let me share the story from my sister's perspective. Victoria was already asleep when she sensed a presence in her room. She began to hear the radio signal distort. This frustrated her since she always made sure the radio was tuned to a stable station that would play music throughout the night. When the distortion continued, she woke up. She turned to check what was wrong and saw me looking at her with my hand on the radio. It's important to mention that as a child, I had long curly brown hair and a fair complexion. For bedtime, I typically wear a big t-shirt or a bata, a nightgown. Victoria described seeing a little girl who looked just like me, wearing a white long-sleeved nightgown. Annoyed that I seemed to be messing with her radio, she said, "Selena, what are you doing? Go to sleep already." However, I didn't respond. She asked me, "Do you want to sleep with me instead?" Still, I didn't reply. I just kept playing with the radio. "Oh my God, Selena, leave the radio alone. Go to sleep. Or I'm telling Mom." Frustrated that I wasn't listening, Victoria started yelling for my mom. My sister explained that she was so angry that I wouldn't leave her alone and that my mom didn't see me in the room. She got up from her bed intending to hit me for being annoying, LOL. But as she got closer, she realized that something was off. She suddenly felt sick. Her heart raced, and she was shocked because even though the little girl looked just like me, it wasn't me. This little girl emitted a terrifying aura. Victoria began backing away, wanting to distance herself from the girl. Despite her fears, she couldn't take her eyes off the little girl and started crying. She kept her gaze on the little girl, who began walking towards her. And that's when Victoria lost it and started screaming at the top of her lungs. By now, everyone in the house was awake. My mom rushed to her room and opened the door to see what was happening. Victoria was screaming and sobbing, repeatedly saying, "Mom, I don't know who she is." My mom recalled that when Victoria said that, she noticed the little girl in her peripheral vision. near the radio. When she turned to look directly at the girl stared right back. My mom was so frightened that she froze for a few seconds. My other sisters gathered around Victoria, trying to comfort her and figure out what was going on. However, it appeared that at this point, only my mom and Victoria could see the little girl, as my other sisters were confused. I remember waking up because my mom gasped loudly and rushed out of the room. I don't exactly remember my sister's screams, but I do recall my grandma being worried since she picked me up and carried me to the commotion. By now, Victoria was still not calming down, and my mom was getting more anxious, unsure how to deal with this situation involving this little girl who looked like her youngest daughter, but clearly wasn't. My grandma couldn't see the little girl, but she could sense a heavy negative energy in the room. She repeatedly asked what was happening while trying to soothe my mom and Victoria, until finally my mom yelled at the little girl, "What do you want? Leave this house." My grandma somehow knew it was some kind of spirit. She put me down and ran to get some holy water. She came back and pushed my mom aside and started throwing holy water all around the room. Victoria said that when my grandma threw the water around the area of the radio, that some of it landed on the little girl, and that the little girl started screaming loud and ugly. That it didn't even sound human, but the only ones that could hear it were my mom and sister. My mom said that when she heard her scream, she felt like her heart was gonna jump out of her chest. It was the most chilling sound ever. She got chills and wanted to throw up. Victoria said she felt a buzzing sensation in her head and her eyes felt swollen as if they were about to pop out. My grandma made everyone get into the car. My mom and Victoria were dazed, so my older sister and the twins had to help guide them out of the house. I don't recall much of this, as my grandma placed me in the car first. All I remember is sitting in the car while my family entered one by one. My sisters and grandma kept asking what happened and what they saw, all while trying to comfort them to calm them down. My mom just had a blank stare and she kept saying, "I don't know what that was." Victoria kept saying, "It wasn't Selena. I don't know who that was." Of course, everyone was still confused because they weren't giving clear answers. After sitting there for a few minutes trying to collect ourselves, Victoria began screaming again, saying she saw the little girl running towards the car. The little girl got taller and had longer hair. My mom seemed to snap out of it and drove off out of the complex. My mom drove to my grandma's house and everyone was quiet for a second. Victoria was too afraid to look out the window. However, she felt something compelling her to look, and when she did, she saw the little girl running towards the car. She started screaming and crying again, shouting, "Mom, she's coming, she's following us." By this point, my mom could no longer see the little girl, but she was just as terrified. My sisters kept trying to hug Victoria and not let her look out the window. As we neared my grandma's house, my mom said, "When I park, all of you get out and run into the house as fast as you can. Don't look back." Of course, being a child surrounded by scared family members, I became frightened too. I remember wanting to cry but feeling too confused by the situation. They were saying it was me, yet it wasn't really me, and I couldn't make sense of it at all. As we reached my grandma's house, my uncle was staying there with my grandparents. They were watching a movie when we barged in. I don't recall the exact details after that, but I remember drinking water, after which my grandma put me to bed. As usual, sleeping with her led to me falling into a deep sleep quickly. My mom and the others must have explained the situation to my uncle and grandpa, but I only remember staying at my grandma's house for a few weeks before my mom decided to look for another place to live. Our time in that duplex was short-lived, lasting perhaps around a month, with much of it spent at my grandparents' house. To this day, the mystery of the little girl's resemblance to me and her haunting presence in the duplex remains unsolved. We never looked into it. I guess my mom and sister were too scared to find out any history about that place. My name is Lucy. I've always been sensitive to the spiritual world, ever since I was little, around 3 years old. I have many scary stories to share with all of you, but let me start by sharing one of the most terrifying experiences I went through. The story takes place in my old hometown in Nevada. I was 14 years old, living with my parents and my big brother, who is 9 years older than me. We lived in a double-wide mobile home in a very small town with 5 casinos that employed and housed the whole town of Jackpot, Nevada. By this age, I had already experienced a fair share of creepy moments and real-life nightmares. This began in the summer of 2003, when the temperature reached 100 degrees out and everybody was enjoying it. My house was originally a 2-bedroom mobile home. At the entrance of the house was the living room, to the right was my brother's bedroom and the main bathroom, and then to my left was part of the living room that connected to the kitchen. My room was an addition to the house made years later. My bedroom door was the back door that used to lead to the backyard. The door had a small vertical sliding window which was slightly frosted, so it was possible to see when anyone passed by my bedroom door. I would often hang out in my room and listen to Selena. I would stay home alone when my parents would go grocery shopping, which was about an hour away from where we lived. I would hear noises like dishes rattling or large items being dragged. For some reason, I would imagine like someone dragging a dead body. The lights would often flicker and the air would quickly turn so cold that I could see my own breath, despite our house not having any type of AC or swamp cooler. My heart would beat so fast. I could feel it throbbing loudly, and the little hairs on the back of my neck would stand on end whenever I would hear these dragging noises. So I would just go outside to wait for my parents to come home. I definitely felt a big sense of relief to see our big blue van pull up to the park and unload our groceries. Don't get me wrong, I had a great childhood and I was an adventurous kid who enjoyed playing. However, I always hesitated when the sun would set. My anxiety crept up and I didn't look forward to going to bed because I had a sense of fear and dread at night. In my room, my little twin-sized bed was against the wall, across from the bedroom door that had a small window where the glow of the moonlight would enter. So technically, I had my very own nightlight. One evening, around 10 o'clock in the night, I was in my bed and I began to hear footsteps coming from the living room towards the kitchen. The footsteps began slowly making their way across the kitchen. I thought it might be my drowsy brother getting ready for his night shift at work. The footsteps paused, and then they started getting closer to my bedroom door. As I lay in my bed with a blanket pulled up to my mouth, the moonlight lightly filled my room. I felt the urge to turn my head towards the window of my closed bedroom door. I saw a faint shadow begin to step closer and closer to the window. Fear filled my body and my body ran cold as I could make out what looked like a lean woman with darkish, maybe brown clothing. She had long, black, messy, and very tangled hair. Her face was very pale and wrinkly, and her long and thin hands were pressed against the small window. My heart raced so fast as I looked at her. To my surprise, she had no eyes. Her eye sockets were completely blacked out and empty, and her mouth was unnaturally wide open, as if she was letting out a horrific, silent scream. I lay there unable to move or scream for help. She stood there, looking at me for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. My breaths were so shallow from the despair I was feeling. The shadow began to slowly back away from the window, and the woman faded away. My older brother, who had his own room, often saw that a shadowy woman creeping into his room. Many nights, he would wake up unable to breathe, with a heavy chest pressure as if someone who looked like a woman was laying on top of him. He would tell her to get off, and when he began praying, she, or whatever it was, would quickly zoom out of his room. Other times, he would wake up to something crusty beginning to crawl on his bed, getting closer and closer to him. Again, he would pray and the shadow would flee. This repeated nightly for about 3 years straight, until my mom, who is also spiritually sensitive, got the house blessed. We also started attending church and Bible studies, which helped so much. We realized that when my mom would do the limpias de huevo, the egg cleanses, it did help, but it made the problem only dormant. A lot of people may disagree with me, especially because we grew up having limpias de huevos our whole life. It's just our costumbres de cultura, our cultural customs. Egg cleansing is far more delicate and complex than you think. It's a door you don't want to open. And a lot of people don't know that this may help temporarily, but you're opening a portal, and that's an invitation for unwanted visitors, if you know what I mean. It's similar to that of an uncovered mirror, an uncovered TV, the use of tarot cards, and yes, the Ouija board. That's definitely something I don't mess with. I respect everyone's cultures and beliefs. Trust me when I tell you, because of everything I've gone through spiritually, that saying a good and powerful prayer out loud and with authority to rebuke whatever is haunting you may be the answer when nothing else has worked. There's always a spiritual war, but that creepy, shadowless women without eyes no longer bothered us. This incident happened to me a few months ago at my best friend's house. I had never really been a firm believer in spirits or the paranormal. My best friend introduced me to a lot of that kind of stuff, considering she is a medium. She would tell me stories about what happened to her when she lived in Texas and when she moved here to Arkansas. Anyways, that day, school had ended and I was riding home with my friend. Fast forward to the night, we had just finished cooking dinner. We ate and headed to her room. I sat on her bed and told her about the previous night. Flashback to the previous night. My brother's girlfriend had stayed over. She was sitting on the floor on her phone while I was on my bed using my phone. And then I felt it. I had felt pressure on my back and on my feet. I was texting my other friend scared. It felt like someone was hugging me from the back, and I actually had shoes on. But that was not the only thing. When I had told my friend about that night, she had told me something was off, that something or someone was on me. I had started shaking at this point, uncontrollably. Even if I had tried to stop, I would not stop shaking. She had told me she had seen an older man, maybe in his 50s. It was someone I knew, someone I was close to. Except I hadn't known anyone that I was close to that had died. She had said that he didn't want to be attached to me, and it was something that I did or said for him to be on me. I couldn't recall anything I said. She said the only way I could get him off was by telling him to leave. So that's what I did. I grabbed her shoulders and said, "Please leave me." And immediately after that, the shaking stopped. I had never been so scared in my life. The next day, we went to my house and searched for photos of who might have been attached to me. Eventually, we came across the only picture we had of my grandpa, someone I had never met. That's when my friend confidently said, "It's him." So that was it for today's spooky stories. Thank you so much for everyone that wrote in their stories. Thank you guys so much. Your guys' stories, call me biased, but damn, they be creepy. And I still have to edit this video, so wish me luck. But if you have experienced something crazy, spooky, send it to daicyspooks@gmail.com. We would love to hear those spooky stories. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye.